Why was an 18-year-old girl lying on a wind-scoured ridge, her crosshairs locked on a man 3 miles away? Why was the fate of soldiers in the valley below balanced on the stillness of her breathing? Didn't move. The rifle rested against her shoulder, its weight as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. The scope's reticle hovered against the horizon, where dust clouds shifted in the Afghan wind. Her pulse was steady. Too steady, Mason thought, glancing at her from beside his spotting scope. He'd seen veteran snipers tremble in easier conditions than this. Mason muttered, his voice caught between disbelief and awe. "That's not a shot, that's a prayer." He wasn't wrong. 3 miles. A distance that no training manual even listed as possible. A distance that every record, every metric, every story whispered among marksmen. Beyond 2 miles, bullets drifted like leaves in the wind, physics bent and twisted by forces too complex to tame. No one had ever landed a confirmed shot at this range. But then again, no one had ever been. Below them, the valley stirred with danger. 3 different cells converging, a weapons deal in motion. Architect of bombings across 3 countries walked freely among his men. He laughed, certain he was untouchable. And perhaps he was, until steadied her breathing and began counting the seconds between gusts of wind. Her finger brushed the trigger. "Command, this is Overwatch 7, she whispered into her headset, never peeling her eye away from the scope. "Requesting permission to engage primary target at extreme range." For a heartbeat, only static. Then the voice of Colonel Sarah Hayes crackled in her ear, clipped, demanding, skeptical. "Confirm your range." 4800 meters, ma'am," said calm, factual, as if announcing the weather. "Wind south-southeast, 42 knots, gusting to 55. Temperature differential -34 Celsius. Effect compensated." Silence. A pause long enough for Mason to glance at her again, his hands shaking slightly against the cold steel of his binoculars. Finally, Hayes' voice returned. "That exceeds maximum effective range by over 2 miles. No military sniper in history has made a confirmed kill beyond 2,700 meters." His jaw tightened. She could hear her mother's voice in her memory, calling her back from the fields in Montana. She could see the ranch house against the endless sky. She could hear the dry rustle of prairie grass under her boots. All of it, the weight of her family, her grandfather's lessons, the debt notices on the kitchen table, it pressed into her bones, steadying her, not shaking her. "With respect, ma'am," she said softly. "No 18-year-old girl from Montana has ever been deployed to Afghanistan either, but here we are." Her words faded into the wind. 6 months earlier, she had been stacking hay bales. That was her world then. A struggling ranch, a family counting pennies, a sky that felt endless and suffocating all at once. The rifle that leaned against the fence post was older than her, a Winchester .270 passed down from her grandfather, through her father, until it rested naturally in her hands. She remembered that afternoon, the bank's letter lying on the kitchen counter, the silence at dinner heavy as lead. The ranch was bleeding money. The cattle couldn't fetch enough to cover the drought. And her father's hands, calloused from decades of work, looked smaller somehow when he folded them over foreclosure papers. She had shouldered her rifle then, lined up on a prairie dog 800 yards away. The crack of the shot echoed. The animal dropped. Her brother had muttered from behind her, "Show off." But it wasn't showing off. It was instinct, a language only she seemed fluent in. She could feel the pull of the wind, the invisible arcs of bullet drop, the fractions of time between trigger and impact. The world slowed when she held a rifle. And that night, when her father admitted there were maybe 6 months left before the ranch was gone, had spoken words that startled even herself. "The Army's offering signing bonuses," she'd said. "Special programs for shooters. Grandpa always said skill was currency. Maybe it's time I spent some of mine." Her father had stared at her across the oak table, his face unreadable. Military service changes you, he'd said. Takes something from you, even when it gives something back. Maybe thought, but watching the ranch die slowly was taking something too. And so days later she walked into her high school gymnasium, the same place where she'd once given a valedictorian speech about chasing dreams. Now she approached the recruiter's table, her folder of shooting records in hand. Sergeant, sharp-eyed and skeptical, flipped through her scores. His tone shifted from polite dismissal to stunned interest. "These real?" he'd asked, tapping the page with his pen. 800-yard groups under 2 inches, 1-mile hits with hunting rifles. "They're real," had said. "I can demonstrate." From that moment, her path was set. Yet even then, even with raised eyebrow and the whispered promise of Fort Harrison evaluations, she hadn't known the full truth. She hadn't known about the locked storage shed at the edge of the ranch, about the old footlocker inside, her grandfather's, filled with uniforms, medals, and a leather-bound journal thick with numbers and diagrams. Ballistics, calculations decades ahead of their time. She hadn't known about the yellowed newspaper clipping, the blurred photograph of a younger Richard receiving a commendation in 1944, or the classified document that fell into her lap, declaring him the man who had made the longest shot in World War II, a record buried in secrecy. And she hadn't known about the note, scribbled on a folded piece of paper tucked against a brass compass. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. Now, months later, in the biting winds of Afghanistan, steadied her rifle with that compass in her pocket. She thought of her grandfather, of secrets passed down without words, of the possibility that something deeper than practice and skill flowed in her blood. The crosshair steadied on. He was laughing, oblivious. Soldiers below carried out their patrol, unaware of the shadow of death balanced on an 18-year-old's trigger finger. Mason's voice cracked in her ear. "If you pull this trigger and it works, the world changes. Do you understand that?" She didn't answer, because she did understand. And she also understood something more she couldn't miss. Not today. Not with everything her family had given, not with the weight of history pressing into her shoulder, not with lives depending on her. She exhaled long and slow, letting the world fall silent. And for a heartbeat, there was nothing but her, the rifle, and the man in her scope. Why had she walked into the evaluation range carrying nothing more than a hunting rifle? Why had the other candidates laughed when they saw her old Winchester .270, its wood stock worn smooth by years of Montana weather? Because didn't need the weapon to impress them. She only needed the truth of what happened when she pulled the trigger. The Fort Harrison qualifying chute began under gray skis that felt heavy with judgment. 24 candidates lined the field, mostly men, mostly older, many already draped in the quiet confidence of military families. They wore expensive scopes, precision rifles built to measure fractions of inches, carried a rifle that had seen more deer than paper targets. The tall redhead beside her smirked. "Hunting rifle, huh? Cute." He introduced himself as Madison Walker, University of Texas ROTC. His words carried a practiced edge. "Most of us are using match-grade precision rifles. That old .270 won't hold up past 600 yards." Only smiled. "Most people don't hit consistently past 600 with hunting rifles, but I suppose we'll see." And see they did. At 200 yards, her shots stacked so tightly the evaluators whispered among themselves. At 400, her groups remained nearly perfect. At 600, when others faltered, her bullets cut patterns as if following invisible rails. When they called the 800-yard line, several candidates shifted uneasily. Madison fumbled against the wind, shots drifting, his jaw tightening with every miss. One candidate struck the wrong target frame entirely. Another swore under his breath, adjusting his scope again and again. Lay prone, calm as if back on the ranch, watching prairie dogs in the morning sun. Her breathing slowed. The first shot snapped center. The second, adjusting slightly for wind touched within an inch. The third, fourth, and fifth, a grouping so tight that a quarter could cover it. Silence hung over the range, then a muttered curse. Jesus Christ, she just shot Submoa at 800 with a hunting rifle. Master Sergeant, a weathered man whose eyes revealed decades behind scopes, lowered his spotting glass. His jaw was tight, his voice even. Where did you learn to read wind like that? Continued her rifle maintenance as if the question itself were obvious. Hunting elk in the mountains, Sergeant. The wind changes every minute. You learn or you go home empty-handed. And temperature, altitude. She paused, cleaning rod still in her hand. Trial and error, a little research, mostly practice. His gaze narrowed. Something flickered there, recognition, maybe unease. Your grandfather was Richard, wasn't he? Froze. The question was casual on the surface, but it wasn't casual at all. Yes, she said cautiously. Did you know him? No, replied a fraction too quickly, but I've heard the name. And he walked away. That night, as the others celebrated or cursed their scores, sat apart, her rifle across her lap. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, her performance, or the way's question had cracked open the secret she'd found in the storage shed. Her grandfather's journal, his impossible calculations, that classified document stamped with red letters. A record buried, a truth hidden. What exactly had her grandfather been part of? The following afternoon, the evaluation continued, not with rifles but with questions. Sat under fluorescent lights across from three evaluators, a military psychologist, a veteran sniper, and a medical officer. How do you handle isolation? The psychologist asked. Shrugged slightly. Most of my life is isolation, ranch work, hunting, target practice. I'm comfortable with my own company. Military sniping may require engaging human targets, the instructor said bluntly. Have you considered the weight of that? She met his gaze. Since I was 12, I've hunted. I understand the finality of a trigger, the responsibility of taking life. I also understand that some lives must be protected, even if it means ending others. The medical officer flipped through her academic records. Exceptional performance in mathematics and physics. Why military service instead of college? Her jaw tightened. Financial necessity and purpose. I want to serve something larger than myself. The psychologist leaned forward. Some might say you're unusually composed for your age. Do you feel you relate well to your peers? Considered, I relate to people who share values, hard work, honesty, responsibility. I don't relate to people who avoid challenge. The medical officer's next question caught her off guard. Have you ever experienced unusual visual processing, exceptional depth perception, faster recognition of movement? The words echoed the document she'd read in the shed, phrases about ocular neural processing and spatial cognition. His hands tightened slightly against her knees. I'm not sure what you mean, she said carefully. I've always had good eyesight. It helps with shooting. The officer scribbled a note. No further comment. 2 hours later, she stepped out into the Montana air, her thoughts heavier than they had ever been. She tried to distract herself with small things, coffee at a diner, watching cars crawl through downtown traffic, but her mind kept circling the same question. How much of her skill was her own, and how much had been written into her blood long before she was born? That evening her phone buzzed with a call. Sergeant's voice was alive with urgency. I just got your evaluation results. In 15 years, I've never seen scores like this. You didn't just qualify, you broke every standard we measure. Fort Benning wants you immediately. They're offering you a place in the Army Marksmanship Unit. Signing bonus, the works. Closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. Fort Benning, the pinnacle. And yet the weight of choice pressed harder. Sergeant, she asked hesitantly, is there anything in the Army called Artemis? The silence on the line was sharp, dangerous. Finally, his voice lowered. "Where did you hear that name?" "I found it in my grandfather's papers." Another pause, longer this time. "That's not something I can discuss over an unsecured line, but if you're asking what I think, let's just say certain talents run in families, and the Army has always been interested in those talents." Her grip on the phone tightened. "So my grandfather was he?" Interrupted, his tone careful. "I don't know the details, but when your scores hit the system, someone flagged your name. That's why Fort Benning responded so quickly. That's all I can say." When she hung up, sat on the porch swing, the brass compass heavy in her palm. She turned it over and over, reading the words etched into the back. "True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye." Her grandfather had known something, maybe more than he'd ever said. The next morning, she was summoned to Fort Benning for a meeting that would change everything. The man waiting for her was Colonel James Hayes, silver-haired, his chest lined with badges. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of secrets older than. "Private," he began, "what do you know about your grandfather's service?" Swallowed. "Not much, sir. I know he fought in World War II, that he was a sniper." Hayes slid a folder across the table. Inside, a photograph. A younger Richard, rifle in hand, standing among other soldiers. "Your grandfather," Hayes said quietly, "was part of a program we called Artemis. It began in 1943. Scientists had identified a rare genetic marker, people who processed visual information differently, faster, more precise, an intuitive understanding of ballistics. They changed the way we fought, though almost no one ever knew." Stared at the photograph, her breath catching as pieces of her life clicked into place. Her instinct, her strange calmness, her ability to feel shots before they happened. "And you believe I carry this marker?" Hayes' eyes narrowed. "We don't believe, we know. What you did at Fort Harrison proved it. You see differently than others. Your brain calculates what theirs cannot." Sat back silent. The world felt both heavier and sharper at once. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now," Hayes said, "you choose. You can pursue standard advanced sniper training. You'll excel, no doubt. Or," he leaned forward, his voice lowering, "you can join Artemis, a program that officially does not exist. 7 candidates worldwide, including you, specialized training, specialized missions, and secrecy that lasts a lifetime." His chest rose and fell slowly. She thought of the ranch, of her father's words, of her grandfather's compass. A choice, one path ordinary, the other shadowed, demanding, maybe even cursed. She whispered, "I need time." "You have 24 hours, Hayes said. "Artemis begins tomorrow." That night, alone in her bunk, turned the compass in her hands and stared into the darkness. Was this destiny, or just circumstance? The stars outside were invisible, hidden by cloud, but she felt her grandfather's words pressing into her chest like gravity itself. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. And somewhere deep inside her, she already knew which choice she would make. Why did the training grounds at Fort Benning feel more like a battlefield than a classroom? Why did every sunrise feel like a judgment? Every drill sergeant stare a question wasn't sure she could answer. Because this wasn't just training, this was survival. Basic training tore away the rhythms of ranch life. Gone were the mornings of feeding horses and stacking hay. Here, her alarm was a barked order, her day measured in sweat, dust, and the scrape of boots against gravel. Drill sergeants like Sergeant Vegas didn't care about her past or her potential. They cared about breaking her down, stripping her to bone and nerve, then remaking her into something harder. For most recruits it was shock, for it was almost familiar. The ranch had taught her exhaustion. Hunting had taught her patience. Her grandfather's lessons, half memory, half mystery, had taught her focus. Still, even she wasn't immune. Her muscles burned from obstacle courses, her lungs scorched from sprints. Her hands blistered against rifle grips. And at night, lying on her bunk, she thought about Montana, The quiet of the fields, her brother's laughter, her mother's tired but determined eyes. She missed them more than she let anyone see. Drill Sergeant Vegas snapped one morning on the range. "Let's see if Montana farm girls can hang with real soldiers." Stepped up to the line, M4 in hand, different from her Winchester but not unfamiliar. Sight alignment, breathing, trigger squeeze. It was all the same language, just new dialect. When the first magazine was spent, the instructors walked silently to check her target. They returned, faces unreadable. "Expert marksman," Vegas said flatly. Then, after a pause, "First time shooting military weapons." "Yes, Sergeant." "Then explain how you just outshot half the battalion." Said nothing. There wasn't an explanation she could give, not one she was ready to share. Word spread quickly. By the end of the week, whispers chased her through the barracks. Prodigy, a freak. Some recruits admired her, others resented her. She didn't ask for either. She only wanted to survive. Her bunkmate, Jessica, leaned across one evening while cleaned her rifle. "You're drawing attention," Jessica warned. "Some good, some not. The trick is proving you're exceptional without making everyone else feel inadequate." "I'm not trying to prove anything," said quietly. "I know," Jessica smiled faintly. "That's why it works, but not everyone sees it that way." The tension came to a head during an advanced marksmanship evaluation. Instead of standard ranges, they were taken to a specialized facility with distances stretching out beyond anything had faced with military-issued weapons. Her name appeared again beside Master Sergeant's on the clipboard, the same man who'd spoken Richard's name at Fort Harrison. He said, his voice carrying that same unreadable edge, "Today we push past standard, up to 1,200 meters, accuracy, speed, adaptability." The rifle placed in her hands was heavier than her Winchester, precision engineered, its scope sharp enough to cut air itself. 800 meters, familiar ground, her shots grouped within 2 inches. 1,000, new but manageable. She missed her first shot, adjusted, then struck true. 1,200, beyond anything she'd attempted in competition. She steadied her breathing, calculating wind drift, bullet drop, temperature. She fired. The first shot landed high, adjusted. The second left, adjusted again. The third, a perfect bull's. Silence followed, then spoke. For perspective, most experienced marksmen struggle to hit that target at all. You're grouping, 11 inches, that's combat effective accuracy. Only nodded, though inside her chest something deeper stirred. Not pride exactly, not relief, something heavier. She was stepping into a world few understood, and she wasn't sure if she belonged there, or if she was being pulled by a current she couldn't escape. Weeks blurred, drills, marches, study, shooting until her shoulders ached. Some nights she lay awake, her grandfather's compass clutched in her palm, wondering if he had felt the same mix of pride and unease when he was her age. The pressure built, and it found its crack in a man named David. Was older, sharper around the edges, with family connections that gave him swagger. From the first day he sneered at her. "Women don't belong here," he muttered during weapons maintenance. "Especially not kids fresh off a farm." Ignored him. She had learned long ago that some battles weren't worth wasting bullets on. But wasn't content to sneer. One night stayed late in the armory cleaning her rifle, appeared leaning against the bench. His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Must be nice. Breaking records without breaking a sweat. Getting colonels to watch you shoot. You know what I think? You're here because the army's desperate to parade a girl around. Diversity poster child. That's all." Kept cleaning, steady hands, steady breath. "My scores speak for themselves." "Not for long," said darkly. "Everyone shows their limits eventually, even prodigies." The next day she noticed something wrong with her scope. Not obvious. Minute adjustments, half a minute off elevation, half off windage. The kind of sabotage only someone who knew equipment intimately would try. "Webb," she whispered to her spotter as they prepared for a live-fire exercise. "Check this." Frowned, adjusting the dials. He tampered with it, subtle, wouldn't notice unless you knew your sight picture like the back of your hand. "Can you fix it?" "Not before the drill starts." "Then I'll compensate manually." The exercise began, a 10-mile hike with gear exhaustion dripping from every pore, then targets distant, shifting, hidden in the wind. Steadied herself, adjusted not just for range and drift but for sabotage. Shot after shot rang out, imperfect groupings but every target struck, every mark hit. By the end, sweat poured down her back, but her record stood unbroken. When she reported the tampering, Captain launched an investigation. Security footage revealed in the armory after hours. Confronted, he spat venom. Women don't belong in special operations, especially not teenage girls pretending to be soldiers. His reply was cold steel. "That teenage girl outshot you with sabotaged equipment. You're done here. Report to command for disciplinary action." As was escorted out, his eyes locked on. "You think this is about me? There are plenty who don't want you here. I'm just the one who got caught." His words clung to her long after he was gone. That night, Staff Sergeant Rico Martinez found her cleaning her rifle again, the same calm ritual she returned to whenever the world tilted. He said, settling beside her, "I saw what happened today isn't entirely wrong." Stiffened. "Not about you," Martinez clarified. "About the resistance you'll face. The military doesn't always welcome change. You're young, you're female, you're exceptional. That makes some people nervous." His jaw tightened. "With respect, Sergeant, I don't care what they think. My scores speak for themselves." Martinez studied her, then nodded. "Good, but be ready. This won't be the last time someone tries to cut you down." His gaze lingered. "How did you know your scope was tampered with? The adjustments were minute. Even I wouldn't have spotted it so quickly." Hesitated, she couldn't tell him about Artemis. "Not yet. It just felt wrong," she said quietly. "The picture didn't match what I expected." Martinez's eyes narrowed, but he let it go. "Whatever it is, you handled it, and you'll need it where we're going." "Where that?" He leaned back. "Afghanistan, Fob Chapman, 3 weeks." His chest tightened. Deployment, the word felt heavy, final. Martinez stood. "We'll be with you, and me, the 3 of us team. Get ready. Chapman isn't a training ground, it's the real thing." That night sat alone in the dark barracks, the compass warm in her palm. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. She wondered what her grandfather would have said if he could see her now. She wondered if he would have warned her, or simply nodded in that quiet way he always had. She wasn't afraid of the shots. She wasn't afraid of the distances. She was afraid of what came after. Because she knew was right about one thing. Sooner or later, everyone showed their limits. And she prayed hers would not come when lives depended on her aim. Why did the air feel heavier than anywhere she'd ever breathed? Why did the mountains look less like scenery and more like teeth, sharp and waiting? Because Afghanistan was not a place you arrived in. It was a place that arrived in you. The C-17 touched down with a groan of steel sand whipping against its sides. Stepped onto the tarmac in her new boots, the desert sun stabbing her eyes. She'd trained for heat before, but not like this. The air felt like a furnace, thick with dust and diesel. Helicopters roared in the distance. The smell of gun oil clung to everything. "Welcome to the end of the earth," muttered, pulling his pack tight against his shoulders. Martinez, steady as always, didn't flinch. "This isn't the end, kid, it's the edge. People come here, they either break or they sharpen. Up to you which one you'll be." Forward Operating Base Chapman sprawled like a scar across the dust. Guard towers, blast walls, the constant hum of generators. Soldiers moved with the rhythm of people who had lived too long in danger to notice it anymore. Kept her head down, but she felt eyes on her. Younger than anyone expected. Smaller, quieter. A woman in a space dominated by men with square jaws and tired stares. The whispers began almost immediately. The sniper prodigy. Heard she hit 1,200 meters in training. Yeah, with a hunting rifle. No way she holds up here. Ignored it, she had learned the whispers never stopped. They just shifted tone, admiration, resentment, disbelief. None of it mattered, only her aim did. Their first mission came sooner than expected. Convoy ambush along Route Bear, Captain explained in the briefing room. We've lost 2 MRAPs to IEDs this month. Insurgents have a pattern. They watch our routes, set up ambushes, then vanish. Martinez, you and your team will provide overwatch from Hill 32. Interdict if necessary. Command wants eyes. And if you get a clean shot, take it. Pulse quickened, her first live mission. On the ridge before dawn, she lay prone, rifle nestled into the earth, scanned with binoculars. Martinez checked comms. The horizon glowed faintly, a desert morning bleeding into existence. Convoy engines rumbled in the valley below, dust clouds trailing behind armored vehicles. Soldiers scanned rooftops, ditches, tree lines. Everyone tense, everyone waiting. And then movement. 2 men, murmured, his voice clipped. 100 meters ahead of the lead vehicle, digging. Adjusted her scope. The world narrowed until only the 2 figures existed, shovels in their hands, dirt flying. Her chest tightened. IED emplacement. Her finger hovered near the trigger. Command overwatch, Martinez radioed. 2 tangos, possible device placement, grid 437. Overwatch, you are cleared to engage. The word struck harder than expected, cleared, as if death required permission. Her crosshairs steadied on the first man's chest. He was young, younger than she expected. His hands moved quickly, urgently, as if planting explosives was no different than planting seeds in a field. Her breath caught. For a second she saw herself back on the ranch, soil under her nails, the rhythm of digging and planting. Her finger trembled. Martinez said softly, "Now." She exhaled. The world stilled, the trigger broke. The man crumpled. The second froze, eyes wide, shovel dropping. He turned to run. Her rifle shifted. Another shot, another body in the dust. Silence pressed against her. The convoy rolled on, unscathed. Soldiers below never knew how close they had come. "Good shooting," said, his voice professional. But couldn't answer. That night back at Chapman, she sat alone, rifle across her knees. Her hands moved through the cleaning motions automatically, but her mind replayed the scene endlessly. 2 men, 2 lives, gone because she had been told to pull the trigger. She stared at her reflection in the rifle's steel. Did they deserve it? Yes, probably, maybe, she didn't know. She remembered their faces, not as targets but as people. Sweat, fear, confusion. Martinez's voice broke her silence. He stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You did your job. You saved that convoy." Her throat tightened. It didn't feel like saving. Martinez sighed, sat down across from her. "The first one never does. You think it'll get easier. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. But remember this. Hesitation kills more of our people than bad aim ever will." She nodded, though it didn't ease the weight pressing into her chest. Later, lying in her bunk, she whispered into the dark, "Grandpa, how did you do this? How did you keep pulling the trigger?" No answer came, only the hum of generators and the distant thud of helicopters. The missions kept coming. Observation posts, overwatch on convoys, watching through her scope for hours, eyes burning, finger hovering, heart torn between dread and duty. Sometimes she didn't fire, sometimes she did. Each time the weight grew heavier. One evening handed her a ration bar and sat beside her. "You okay?" "I don't know." "You're not supposed to know," he said simply. "If you ever stop questioning it, that's when you've lost yourself." She turned the compass over in her hand, the inscription digging into her skin. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. She wondered if that meant pulling the trigger when ordered, or knowing when not to. Then came the mission that would etch itself into her forever. Intelligence flagged a compound outside, a suspected bomb maker. High value. Orders were simple: surveillance, confirm identity, eliminate if possible. On the ridge sat her rifle. Through her scope she saw him, a man surrounded by children, laughing, playing, while soldering wires to a circuit board on the same table. Her chest locked. "Target confirmed," said quietly. "Orders." Martinez's voice came steady. "Command says green light, take the shot." His finger froze. Children ran at his feet. A little girl climbed into his lap, tugging at his beard. He kissed her forehead, then returned to the device. His stomach twisted. Martinez's voice sharpened. "Orders are clear." Her breath shook. "There are children, Sergeant." "Collateral happens," Martinez said grimly. "If he leaves that compound, people die. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands." Her eye pressed against the scope, crosshairs over his chest, over his heart, over the girl's head. She couldn't breathe. "I can't," she whispered. "Silence." Martinez exhaled slowly. "Then I'll do it." He shifted his rifle, grabbed his arm. "No." Their eyes met. Hers burned with something beyond defiance. "I'll wait," she said. "He'll step away, he has to." Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat stung her eyes. Children laughed. The man bent lower, twisting wires. Then finally he stood, stepping outside to fetch tools. Fired one shot, the man dropped. The children screamed. Stomach lurched, her vision blurred. "Target down," Martinez said flatly into comms. "No collateral." But didn't hear him. She only heard the girl's cries echoing in her chest. That night she didn't clean her rifle. She couldn't touch it. Instead, she sat on her bunk, the compass clenched in her fist until the edges cut into her skin. Her grandfather's words haunted her. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. But what if her heart broke every time she pulled the trigger? Why did the compound feel quieter after that shot? Why did walk the base like a shadow, as if something in her had been taken she couldn't get back? Because war doesn't just steal lives, it steals pieces of the people who survive it. For days after, moved like a ghost. She went through motions, drills, briefings, the daily grind of Chapman life. She still cleaned her rifle, but the ritual no longer calmed her. The steel reflected her face back to her, harder, thinner, eyes lined with something she didn't recognize. Noticed first. "You're not sleeping," he muttered one morning, dropping into the mess hall seat across from her. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," he leaned closer. "You keep staring at nothing. I say your name, you don't hear me. I watch your hands, they're shaking when you think nobody's looking." Forced a bite of scrambled eggs, they tasted like dust. "I pulled the trigger, I followed orders, that's what soldiers do." Studied her quietly. That's what soldiers survive, doesn't mean it's all they are. Later that night, Martinez joined her in the armory. "You know," he said, tossing her a rag, "the army doesn't need perfect shots, it needs people who can keep showing up, even when it breaks them, especially when it breaks them." She wiped her rifle, silent. Martinez lowered his voice. "I've seen people like you, prodigies, talents so sharp they cut the people who carry them. Some burn out, some find a way to carry it. Which are you gonna be?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. Because deep down she wasn't sure. Then came the orders. A mission larger than any before. High-value target. Falcon. Insurgent leader orchestrating strikes across the region. His network supplied weapons, coordinated attacks, spread fear like wildfire. Taking him out wasn't just tactical, it was symbolic. The briefing room was tense. His voice carried weight. "Intel places Falcon in the Shai Valley. He'll be moving between compounds, surrounded by armed guards. Overwatch teams will cover the valley floor. Interdiction required before he relocates. Maps spread across the table, routes marked, wind charts scattered, distances whispered. And then Colonel Sarah Hayes walked in. Silver hair pulled tight, eyes sharp as glass, felt her stomach tighten. Hayes, the same voice she'd heard during her impossible ridge shot, the same name her grandfather's files had mentioned. Hayes' gaze swept the room, then settled on it lingered, too long. "This mission is sensitive," Hayes said. "It requires precision beyond standard capability, which is why Artemis oversight will be involved." Whispers rippled through the room. Artemis. Most of them had never heard the word, those who had looked uneasy. After the briefing, Hayes caught alone. "You know why you're here?" His throat tightened. "Because I shoot well." "No," Hayes said firmly. "Because you see differently. Because your grandfather saw differently. Because Artemis isn't just history, it's legacy. And it's yours." Clutched the compass in her pocket. "I didn't ask for legacy. I didn't ask to carry his secrets." Hayes leaned closer. "None of us do, but you don't get to choose your blood, only what you do with it." Stared at her boots, words tangled. She wanted to ask 100 questions about her grandfather, about Artemis, about what Hayes expected of her. But Hayes was already walking away. The mission launched at dawn. The valley stretched vast and empty, ridges jagged against the sky. Lay prone beside her, Martinez scanning through binoculars. The convoy moved below, armored vehicles crawling through dust, soldiers tense, rifles scanning shadows. Her rifle pressed against her shoulder, scope cutting through haze. Every adjustment mattered: distance, wind, temperature. She calculated instinctively, numbers flowing through her veins as if she had always known them. And then movement. A convoy of trucks rolled from a compound 2 miles away. Armed men perched in the beds, weapons bristling. At the center, a black SUV, Falcon. "Target identified," murmured. Steadied her scope, too far for a clean shot. The convoy zigzagged, guards vigilant. Any mistake could mean chaos. "Overwatch, this is command," Hayes' voice cut through. "Confirm target, eliminate when clear." His finger brushed the trigger, her chest tightened. She waited. The SUV hit a straight stretch. Falcon's face appeared briefly through tinted glass. She fired. Glass shattered. The SUV swerved, men scrambled. Confusion erupted. "Hit confirmed," shouted. But Falcon wasn't down. He stumbled from the SUV, clutching his shoulder, dragged by guards toward a ditch. "Target moving," Martinez snapped. "Finish it." Her scope adjusted, breath stilled, crosshairs locked, but Falcon stumbled behind a guard, shielded. Hesitated, her heart pounded. Martinez barked. She squeezed. The bullet tore through the guard's shoulder, non-lethal, but enough to spin him aside. Falcon exposed. She fired again. Falcon collapsed. The valley fell silent, except for the ringing in her ears. "Target down," Martinez said into comms. Exhaled, but the relief was short-lived. That night Hayes summoned her. "You hesitated," Hayes said bluntly. Swallowed, I adjusted. "You hesitated," Hayes repeated. "And in hesitation there is risk. Do you know how many eyes are on you? Do you know what it means to be Artemis? You don't get to hesitate." His voice cracked. They were human beings, not just targets. Hayes' expression softened only slightly. "And that's exactly why you'll be better than the rest. But if you don't learn to master that heart of yours, it will break you." Clutched the compass, words pressing against her chest. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. But what if her heart was the very thing keeping her from surviving? She lay awake that night, the desert wind rattling the walls of her quarters. She thought of Falcon's face, of the children at the compound, of the men on the ridge, each one marked in her memory, carried like ghosts. And she thought of her grandfather, of a record no one believed existed, a shot so far, so impossible, it had been buried in secrecy. She wondered if that was where she was headed, toward an impossible shot, toward a legend she didn't want but couldn't avoid, toward a moment when hesitation and heart would either save her or destroy her. Why did the desert seem quieter that morning, as if holding its breath? Why did hands feel heavier on the rifle than ever before? Because something inside her was close to breaking. After Falcon, Chapman shifted. Soldiers nodded at her with respect now, whispers of her skill turning into quiet recognition. The prodigy, the one who hit him through tinted glass at nearly 2 miles. It should have felt like validation. It didn't. Every nod was another weight. Every whispered story made the ghosts louder. Saw it he'd always seen through her. "You don't celebrate your wins," he said one night as they sat under a desert sky, stars scattered like broken glass. "They don't feel like wins," she replied softly. "Then what do they feel like?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Like debts, and I don't know how to pay them." Before he could answer, alarms sounded across the base, the kind that jolted even the most exhausted soldiers upright. "Scramble," Martinez barked, shoving gear into his pack. "Convoy ambushed outside, QRF pinned, we're going in." The helicopter blades cut through night, carrying them into darkness. Clutched her rifle, eyes locked on the ground below as streaks of tracer fire lit the hills like veins of fire. They landed on a ridge overlooking the valley. Gunfire echoed, distant but sharp. Through her scope, saw the scene. An American convoy trapped, vehicles smoking, insurgents flooding from the hills. "We're too far for standard support," Martinez said grimly. "It's yours." Adjusted her scope. The distance was staggering, farther than any shot she had taken. 4,000 meters to the nearest target, almost unthinkable. Her breath caught. "That's beyond effective range." "Not for you," Martinez said, eyes locking on hers. "Command cleared it, take it." Her stomach twisted. She calculated instinctively wind, drop, rotation of the earth itself. Her grandfather's notes whispered in her memory. Impossible angles, hidden equations. Her crosshairs found the insurgent leader directing fire on the convoy. She steadied, heart pounding. Murmured, "You've got this." She exhaled, squeezed. The shot traveled nearly 5 seconds, an eternity in combat. Through her scope, she saw the figure crumple. Confusion rippled among the enemy. Soldiers below seized the chance, rallying, returning fire. "Target down," Martinez shouted. But more insurgents surged from the hills. The battle spread. Gunfire cracked against the ridge, dirt spitting around them. Mortars thumped. The valley turned into chaos. "Multiple tangos advancing," barked. Shifted, firing again and again. Each shot deliberate, each hit precise. But they kept coming, too many. "Command overwatch," Martinez yelled into comms. "We're compromised, taking fire on the ridge." "Negative," came the crackling reply. "Hold position until convoy clears." Chest tightened, they were pinned. Rounds smacked against stone inches from her head. She ducked, heart hammering. For the first time, real fear clawed up her spine. Pulled her down, "Stay with me." Her hands shook, her vision tunneled, she couldn't breathe. Martinez barked, grabbing her shoulder. "Focus, you don't get to freeze now." But she had frozen. For the first time in her life, the rifle felt foreign, heavy, impossible. In her mind, she saw faces. The bomb maker's children, Falcon clutching his shoulder, the young man digging in the road, all of them, layered, overlapping, staring back at her. Her breath came ragged, her finger wouldn't move. His voice cut through, raw, "Look at me." She turned. His eyes burned with something more than urgency. "You're not pulling that trigger for command, not for Hayes, not even for Martinez. You're pulling it for me, for us. You save us or we die here. Do you understand?" Something cracked inside her, a floodgate opening. She looked back through the scope. Wind, drop, earth spin, distance. It all flowed into place like a puzzle she'd already solved. Her heartbeat slowed, her finger steadied. She fired. One shot, One insurgent dropped. Then another, then another. She was back. Her world narrowed to crosshairs and breath. Shot after shot, cutting the advancing force, thinning them before they reached the convoy. Each trigger pull was still heavy, but now it carried purpose. Hours passed like minutes. When dawn finally crept over the ridges, the convoy was moving again, battered but intact. The insurgents retreated into the hills, broken by the relentless watch of a single rifle. Collapsed back, chest heaving, pressed a hand to her shoulder. "You held us together." But shook her head, her hands trembled. "I froze." "And then you didn't," said firmly. "That's the part that matters." Back at Chapman, Hayes was waiting. 4,000 meters, Hayes said quietly, sliding a report across the table. "Unofficially, that's the farthest confirmed kill by a female sniper in recorded history. Do you realize what you did?" Stared at the report. Numbers, distances, coordinates, words like record and historic. All she saw were faces. "I don't care about records," she whispered. "I care about not freezing when people depend on me." Hayes studied her. "And yet you broke one. You didn't just live up to your grandfather's name, you surpassed it." His throat tightened. She wanted to feel pride, she didn't. Later, alone, she pulled out the compass. Her thumb traced the inscription until the words blurred. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. But her heart was tired. Her heart was breaking. That night she didn't sleep. She sat outside, desert wind biting against her skin, eyes locked on stars. Found her there, silent. "You think you're breaking," he said softly, settling beside her. "But maybe you're just becoming. People like us. We don't get to stay who we were. We change. We adapt. Or we don't make it." Didn't answer. She didn't know if she was adapting or unraveling. But somewhere deep inside, she felt the weight of something gathering. Not just missions, not just orders. Something bigger, something impossible. And she knew with a kind of dread that the shot everyone would remember, the shot that would define her, hadn't happened yet. Why did the morning feel wrong from the very first breath? Why did its gut whisper that today would not end like the others? Because some days are written in shadows, long before the sun rises. The briefing was short, too short. Martinez didn't like it, didn't either. Neither did. The mission was simple on paper: overwatch for a joint patrol moving into a valley suspected of harboring insurgent leadership. Standard surveillance, high ground advantage, confirm or deny movement. But's tone was strained. Hayes was there too, standing silent in the back, her eyes never leaving. That was what chilled her the most. The helicopter dropped them onto a ridge at first light. Wind howled, dust cutting across their faces. Set her rifle, his binoculars, Martinez his comms. From above, the valley stretched vast and jagged, stone ridges bleeding into narrow paths. The patrol moved below, boots crunching on gravel, gear clattering faintly. For hours nothing, just sun, wind, and the quiet rhythm of observation. And then movement. "Eyes on," muttered. His voice dropped low, tight. Multiple hostiles, North Ridge dug in. Adjusted her scope. She saw them, shadows shifting, rifles braced, waiting, dozens. "It's an ambush," Martinez growled. He snapped into his radio. "Overwatch to command. Multiple tangos, North Ridge, preparing to engage patrol." Static hissed. Then Hayes' voice. "Hold fire. Confirm high-value individual before engagement." His jaw tightened. "They're about to hit the patrol. We don't have time." "Orders are clear," Hayes replied. Martinez's teeth clenched, eyes sharp. "If you see him, take it." Minutes crawled. The insurgents shifted, their rifles following the patrol below like wolves circling sheep. His breath slowed. Her pulse pounded. And then she saw him. A figure taller than the rest, scarf wrapped tight, commanding with gestures instead of words. The patrol's death hung in his raised hand. "Got him," whispered. "Range?" Martinez asked. Her stomach dropped. 4,800 meters. Silence. That's impossible, muttered. That's beyond any confirmed kill, that's. Martinez cut him off. Can you do it? His eye pressed harder to the scope. Wind screamed across the ridge. Mirage shimmered in the heat. Bullet drop would be meters. Drift, seconds of flight time. Every variable stacked like a wall. But her grandfather's notes flashed in her memory. Impossible calculations, scrawled in faded ink. Equations he had solved long before anyone believed they could be. She exhaled. I can try. Then it's yours. She steadied, at her side calling wind, range, elevation. Martinez silent, holding the line. The crosshairs trembled, then stilled. She squeezed. The rifle roared, the bullet leapt into the air, and then silence. Seconds stretched, 3, 4, 5. Through her scope, she saw the leader glance skyward, as if sensing fate itself. Then he fell. Chaos exploded. Insurgents scattered, shouting, firing wildly into the valley. The patrol below hit the ground, scrambling for cover. Martinez relayed, voice tight, target neutralized, ambush disrupted, patrol clear. Barely heard him. She just lay there frozen, chest heaving. 4,800 meters. The number seared itself into her bones. She had fired into impossibility and hit. But instead of triumph, a hollow ache spread through her chest. Because all she saw in her mind was a man raising his hand and never lowering it. Back at Chapman, silence greeted them. Not all, not disbelief, just silence, the kind that meant something too big had just happened. Later that night, Hayes summoned her. You know what you did, Hayes said quietly. His throat was dry. I took the shot. You didn't just take it. You shattered every record, every limitation. Do you understand? You just rewrote the book. Shook her head. I didn't want to. Hayes' eyes narrowed. History doesn't ask what you want. It only asks what you leave behind. Clenched the compass in her fist. My grandfather left this behind. He left Artemis. He left secrets. And he left me with a burden I never asked for. Hayes stepped closer, voice low. He left you with a gift, and today you proved why. That shot wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was legacy. His chest tightened. Legacy, the word felt like chains. When Hayes left, lingered in the doorway. Everyone's talking, he said softly. They're calling it legendary. Looked up at him, eyes burning. It doesn't feel like a legend. It feels like I stole something I can't give back. Didn't answer. He just sat beside her, silent, as she turned the compass over and over in her hand. True aim comes from the heart, not just the eye. But tonight, her heart felt like it was breaking under the weight of a shot that would echo forever. And deep down, she wondered if legends weren't built on greatness, but on the things you lose along the way. Why did the base feel different now, as if the walls themselves carried her name? Why did every glance linger longer, every whisper fall quiet when she passed? Because she wasn't just anymore. She was the 18-year-old who had shattered the impossible. The news spread faster than she could breathe. Not through headlines, those wouldn't come for years, but through murmurs, radio chatter, encrypted reports slipping across commands. The shot, 4,800 meters, confirmed, clean. A record that wasn't supposed to exist. Soldiers nodded as she walked by, their eyes a mixture of awe and distance. To them, she wasn't one of them anymore. She was something else, something untouchable. It suffocated her. At night, she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling fan spinning endlessly. Snored softly across the room. Martinez scribbled into his notebook and clutched the compass until her knuckles whitened. She should felt pride. She didn't. She felt hollow. Because records don't carry the sound of children screaming. Records don't carry the weight of hesitation. Records don't carry the silence after a man falls and never gets up. But she did. Days blurred into each other. Missions came and went. She hit every target they asked her to, And every time her chest grew heavier. She became a weapon people pointed and fired, nothing more. Until one night found her on the perimeter, sitting alone, her rifle across her knees. "You're not sleeping again," he said. She didn't answer. He sat down beside her, staring into the darkness. "Do you know what the guys are saying? They're calling you the Artemis shot. They're saying no one will ever touch it, not in this lifetime." Exhaled, long and tired. "I don't want to be Artemis." Glanced at her. "Then what do you want to be?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to say normal. She wanted to say home. She wanted to say just. But instead she whispered, "I don't know anymore." Nodded as if that answer was enough. "You don't have to know now, just don't let them write your story before you do." But the truth was, the story was already being written. When their rotation ended and she returned stateside, the whispers followed. The classified reports had already reached training schools, command offices, quiet corners of military history. Instructors whispered her name like myth. Recruits passed it along in barracks like legend. The 18-year-old girl who broke the unbreakable, but couldn't hear any of it without flinching. Her father hugged her at the ranch, holding her longer than he ever had. Her mother's tears soaked into her shoulder. Her brother stared at her differently now, as if she had become someone he couldn't quite place. The ranch was still standing somehow, the foreclosure delayed by her army checks and a miracle season of rain. But even the land felt different. The fields didn't stretch endlessly anymore. They felt smaller, as if they no longer had room for her. At night she walked the pastures with her old Winchester .270, the same rifle that had started it all. She lined up on fence posts, prairie dogs, distant rocks. Every shot landed where she wanted it to. But it didn't feel the same. The prairie didn't need saving. The prairie didn't bleed when she pulled the trigger. Weeks later, Hayes called her in. A quiet room, blinds drawn, folders stacked neatly. "You're being transferred," Hayes said simply. "Artemis is expanding. We need people who see differently. People like you." Shook her head. "I didn't agree to Artemis." Hayes studied her. "You don't agree to legacy, it claims you. You can either run from it or guide it. Choice is yours." His chest burned. "What if I don't want to be remembered for killing people?" For the first time, Hayes' voice softened. "Then be remembered for what you carried so others didn't have to." Silence stretched. When finally walked out of that office, she wasn't sure if she'd said yes or no. Because maybe both were true. Years passed in fragments, missions blurred, records stood, but never forgot the ridge, never forgot the faces, never forgot that every story of greatness carried shadows no one else could see. And one night, sitting on her porch back at the ranch, rifle across her knees, she finally whispered it aloud. To no one, to everyone. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't shout. It doesn't brag about records or names. It just breathes. It just acts. And then it carries the silence after. The wind tugged at the prairie grass. The stars stretched endless above her. Closed her eyes. Not a legend, not a prodigy, not Artemis. Just a girl with a rifle. And a heart still learning how to aim.